From the Alvin and Rosalie Sarachek studio, PBS Kansas presents Kansas Week.
Kansas Senate Republicans advocate for direct elections of state Supreme Court justices. The House Appropriations Committee votes to cut state funding for public broadcasting. But first, Wichita's $500 million school bond issue appears to have failed. We'll discuss why and what's next. Join us right now for Kansas Week. Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Jared Cerullo. By a very narrow margin, voters in the Wichita School District rejected a $450 million bond issue this week. School officials said the ambitious facilities makeover was necessary to accommodate declining enrollment and population shifts. Cake's Kate Devine has the reaction.
The facility needs have not gone away and won't until we have funds to address them. And we are committed to running the district in the most efficient way while serving all of our children.
Wichita Public Schools Superintendent Kelly Buellfield says the district was hoping for a different outcome, but the needs haven't changed.
Millions of dollars that we're putting into repairing buildings, just the foundations of our buildings, right? Those dollars don't help kids learn and read. They just help keep our buildings open. And so we'll continue to tell that story. We'll continue to talk about the needs that we have.
The $450 million bond failed by just 295 votes. Opponents like Ben Davis say voters didn't trust the plan.
Both sides supported kids. Both sides supported Wichita Public Schools. It was a matter of what's going to happen with the money? Is the money really the solution that the Wichita Public School District, said that it was? And my side says, no, it wasn't.
Supporters argued the district's 70 and 80-year-old buildings need upgrades.
They say buildings are not a problem. It's really important that Wichitans understand these buildings really are in disrepair. 70 and 80-year-old buildings, and age takes its course.
A key concern for voters? Taxes. While the bond wouldn't have raised the tax rate, property values could still rise, meaning higher tax bills.
I think that was part of a mistake, and it was really only ever a half-truth. Yes, the tax rate change for that one mill levy item is going to stay the same, but that's only half the equation. The other half of the equation for property taxes is, of course, the valuation of your property.
Low turnout may have also played a role, with about 14% of voters casting a ballot.
I think Wichitans care. I'm excited that Wichitans have engaged on this matter. There's a little disappointment in that the turnout wasn't as great.
What's next? The district could scale back the plan or find other funding options.
This was always going to be a close issue. People think very strongly about Wichita Public Schools. They're just very divided, obviously, on what the solution is going forward to make Wichita Public Schools stronger.
And here to discuss this and some of this week's other big stories is the Cato Consulting Group's Ben Davis, who you just saw in that package. He led the campaign against the bond issue. Wichita Eagle opinion editor Dion Leffler and Sedgwick County Commissioner Jim Howell. Thanks all of you for joining us today. So Ben, I'll start with you. You've taken some flack from the other side that were supporting this bond issue because of, and you mentioned half-truths. But you've taken some flack for half-truths in some of the reporting facts, I guess, that you issued as well. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I have a sense of vindication in the fact that we've won. So obviously a majority of people didn't think that those were half-truths. Look, there were various things said about student test scores without really any real data to back any of that up, other than saying that I was somehow cherry-picking something. We can go into that if you'd like to. The property tax thing speaks for itself. I don't know what else to say other than your property taxes are calculated on a mill levy rate and the valuation, and they weren't being upfront about any of that. I think there's a lot of issues that we could talk about as to the timing of all of this. What happened with the money with the other bond, money that was used on schools that have since been shut down, that until the Eagle did some reporting on it just earlier this week, the school district couldn't even provide the amount of money that the schools that have been shut down received. There were all kinds of issues with this bond. I'm glad to see that it failed and it went down. The naysayers can say whatever they want about the campaign that we ran, but clearly we won, so we have that victory.
And what about the argument, before I move on to other guests. What about the argument or the accusation that people who voted no on this bond issue don't care about our children or don't care about
That
our
was always a
schools?
false dichotomy, and I reject that absolutely. I said from the very beginning, other people said from the very beginning, we want strong Wichita Public Schools. But to think that continuing on another bond issue of almost $500 million, which again was just phase one of a potential 2 to 3 phase deal, I think that's vacuous. That was a false dichotomy to begin with, and I'm glad to see voters rejected it.
All right. Dion, I have a feeling you might have a little differing opinion here.
Well, yeah, I think either you support the schools or you don't. And saying, you know, we want strong schools, you got to put the money behind it. And every other district in this area has put money behind their schools. And that's why their schools are better than the schools in the Wichita
You
district.
can't say that.
Yes, I can say that.
No, you can't say that. You can't say that at all. So,
Everybody's got better facilities in Wichita. You know that.
Okay, so they have better facilities, but the facilities aren't the issue. We've invested in facilities before, and we haven't seen any of the results from
16
that
years
stuff.
ago, and we have seen results.
Okay, what are they?
The results were that our schools are better. I mean, they're
You can't just say they're better. I mean, come on, give real numbers here. Where are you saying this? You said in the editorial, I don't know if you wrote it, but you had a hand in writing it, that Mr. Billingham from WSU just completely laid waste to the claims we were making about test scores. If you go back and read he's a better makeup artist than he is a data analyst. And all you did was sit there and just say he laid waste to it. Again, just saying he made cherry picking or something like that. You don't actually cite real data.
He's a professor of sociology. He's not a...
That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean anything. He didn't actually provide any real arguments for the data, and neither did you in your editorial. All you said was he laid waste to it, but you didn't provide any evidence. That's this whole campaign for the yes side was a bunch of tired bromides and a lot of threadbare arguments without any real data to back it up, to somehow think that we're going to continue to fund these building projects when there's no accountability, no transparency. I'm glad to see that voters who came out and voted no to reject this thing. And if it comes back again, myself and others are going to lead campaigns to try to defeat it until there's more accountability and transparency.
You ever going to tell us who those others are? Who are your donors?
I made a commitment to those people from the very beginning that I wasn't going to do that, and I'm going to stay true to my word on that. And why does that have anything to do with this? We're talking about Wichita Public
Why wouldn't it have
Schools.
anything to do with that?
Do you think you should have to file campaign finance reports?
I will have to file campaign finance reports.
Will that be brought out at that point in time then?
Yeah.
Who donated to your campaign?
Yeah.
Okay. Jim Howell, what do you have to say about this?
Well, not to surprise everybody, but I'm a little bit different. I think that student achievement and facilities are actually two different topics. I think almost every school district in the state of Kansas actually has a bond issue. As a state, we've become very dependent on bond issues to take care of our buildings. I think it's well known that maintenance that can be deferred generally will be deferred for the next bond issue. I think that's kind of our normal in Kansas. I don't know that achievement necessarily is tied to the condition of the buildings. I think it's two different topics. And so student achievement, I think, is suffering in our state. I think there's a lot of issues why that happens. I'm not sure that better facilities makes better achievement. So I think we have billions of dollars worth of buildings in our school district here that need to be taken care of. I'm a bit bothered by the fact that we assume there's going to be another bond issue. We let deferred maintenance stack up, and then we put it upon the people to say you have to pass another tax increase. And it is a tax increase because this one would have sunset in a few years from now. So it is a tax increase to take care of buildings that frankly is a taxpayer's responsibility that we entrust those leaders to take care of our buildings. And I don't like the fact that we have to have another bond issue over and over again to take care of what we actually own as the taxpayers.
And I wonder as well one second, Diana, I wonder as well if a lot of people realize that the entire operating budget or the number, whether you go for dollar or the number of mills, the entire operating budget, the number of mills is greater than the entire city of Wichita's budget or Sedgwick County.
It is a large government. And again, there's a lot of responsibility. And school funding is a very high cost in our state. We're going to be talking about judicial selection here in just a minute, but our courts have said they have to fund schools at these levels, and that's why we end up where we are. And I know that people will argue about the numbers, but it is, all things considered, more than $20,000 per student per year is a lot of money, and it's not enough. We need more money to fix the facilities that have dilapidated. And why that is, we can sit there and point fingers back and forth, but at the end of the day, we got billions of dollars worth of buildings to take care of, and they are in bad shape.
These costs, that's what the school district is
Right.
saying. These costs are going to come due, Dion, whether this bond passes or not.
Well, you know, I would dispute what Jim just said. I can't think of a single example where a school district that has superior facilities has lower achievements than school districts that have lesser facilities. If anybody can give me an example of that, I'd love to hear it.
There's another factor here as well. I think, you know, we have a large urban, largest school district in our state, and you're comparing that with places like Mays and Valley Center
the
and Dover.
populations are totally
At the end of the day,
Bingo.
there's
So
entirely different systems, and these smaller school districts have incredibly beautiful facilities. They've invested in those facilities, and achievement may be entirely different reasons why achievement's different in those schools. It's hard to correlate condition of buildings to student achievement. There's a lot of other factors. We have a minority-majority school district, right? And so there's a lot of other factors, socioeconomic factors in play here that are obviously impacting achievement. We have no doubt that's a major factor here in 259.
So the school district with the biggest challenge has the worst buildings, and that doesn't make any difference.
But it doesn't.
I'll
But
give you the last
here's the
word.
thing: it didn't have to be that way with the worst buildings. Again, this has to do with responsibility. They have almost $1 billion. All anybody has to do is go and look at the budget. It's a public document. Their capital outlay budget is $115 million for fiscal year 2024-2025. It's very difficult to even decide where that money goes. Nobody's saying that we don't have buildings. Nobody's saying that there aren't building needs and ongoing maintenance. And I think it's a misnomer to even call it deferred maintenance. It really is ongoing maintenance, and anybody should plan and budget for that. The question has been, what has the school district been doing with the money that it's been given? Why have we just now been hearing about these building and facility needs right before a bond issue when another mill levy and a revenue stream is going to be dropped off? I went back last Friday when it was really cold, and they had a Facebook post about caution for kids having to wear coats for school. It's the first time they've ever had a post like that, and it 2 years. I went as far back as 2 years, couldn't find anything. We've been into winter for months. Last year, there was a huge cold snap, couldn't find anything about kids having to wear coats to go to school. But then all of a sudden, 3 days before we were about ready to take a bond vote, well, now we've got kids who are going to school wearing coats. I think there's just been a lot of misinformation. The money has not been responsibly allocated, and I think that's been a huge problem.
This is the final word here. I think we have a more conservative school board than we've had in a long time. We also have a very conservative superintendent. And I have to say, compared to what we've seen in the past, he's actually very smart. I think the idea we're not going to have a bond issue ever is not reasonable. We are going to have one in the future at some point. And we have problems we have to be addressed one way or the other. I think the achievement is a huge issue. Completely agree with you. But I just want to give credit, if you will, to our school board and our superintendent. Frankly, this was something that they all inherited. This is a problem that's been developing for the last decade.
I do need to move on. That's a discussion that will continue to go on, I'm sure. The cost of the failed bond issue, however, is roughly compared to all of the money that the state of Kansas appropriated last year for public broadcasting. Those funds were shared among the 10 public television and radio stations that serve the state of Kansas. And now those funds appear to be shrinking even further. This map compares Kansas with several other Midwestern states. You can see the vast disparity in public media funding. Now, the House Appropriations Committee, at the request of Democratic Representative Henry Helgerson of Wichita, has voted to cut state funding even further. Helgerson says stations should consolidate and cut costs.
In Wichita, we have a station that has a brand new facility. They can continually complain about that they don't have enough money from the state. But they had enough money to do a lot of enhancements.
Despite Helgerson's claim, the PBS Kansas building is not new. It was built in 1997 and is the former Ameritrust Credit Union headquarters. PBS Kansas was able to acquire the building during the COVID pandemic after prices for commercial office space plummeted. In addition, the facility was financed by private donors, not government funding. Helgerson's push to slash state support aligns with the Trump administration's declared desire to eliminate federal funding altogether for public television and radio. Representative John Alcala of Topeka opposed Helgerson's motion for several reasons.
And I found out over this last summer, this is not an exaggeration, I bet 30-40% of people that are homeschooling their children are using PBS, and that is part of the curriculum, it's part of the daytime education for them.
That's a terrible idea.
And not only that, they're Republicans. And no, really, that's serious. I'm not joking with you that my largest constituent base, they are using it for that. And then I found out there was a lot of seniors that all they do is watch public television because of the emergency alerts was one of the reasons. And then the other reason is it has a big diverse crowd. I mean, it does. It has a lot of people from all different backgrounds that watch it.
That argument did not sway Helgerson, who went ahead with his motion to cut funding by $200,000. It passed on a 12-8 vote. The final state budget, however, has yet to be drafted and voted on. Even if state support would be restored to last year's level, PBS Kansas still must raise 74% of its operating funds through viewer donations to continue operating. So, Jim Howell, I'll start with you. The Sedgwick County donates or gives some money to public broadcasting as well. So what do you think about this? Should public broadcasting be funded by state and local governments?
Well, it's interesting. Years ago, we started our feeds on social media channels. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But at the end of the day, the viewership on those channels is just a pittance of what we get through KPTS, PBS Kansas. At the end of the day, our viewership is much, much higher with public broadcasting. And if you really want to have transparent government and have people know what's going on, it does provide a service that people can't get any other way, really. So I have been a supporter of providing that opportunity for our community through that. I think right now it's about $80,000 a year we would normally spend. I know there's a bit of a contractual impasse right now, but we have historically provided viewers access to Sedgwick County information through public television for decades. And so I hate to see that change at this point. I have been supportive of it. I think it's worth that. And you think about it in terms of our budget, how much of our budget that is. It's actually a very small amount of our budget. $1 million, $7 million, and so we're talking $80,000. It's not very much money.
Dion, Henry Helgerson's a Democrat. I mean, what do you think about a Democrat offering to slash public funding for public TV?
I haven't talked to Henry. I don't know what his rationale is for that. I think it's a mistake. I think that this station and others like it, KMUW and KCUR up in Kansas City, I think they do provide a valuable service to our state. Without programs like this, really, there's no other place where you're going to see, an in-depth discussion of some of these issues.
Right.
And I just think, when I look at the 700,000 now they're trying to take it down to 500,000. It's like, why do you get to hang your name on this?
Yeah, right.
Split between how many stations across the state?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Ben Davis?
I'm not going to say one way or the other if I agree or disagree with it, but I think what he is doing is tapping into a mood that's across the country right now, where people perceive things to be, not the central core element of what government is. Now, we can debate that here, and I do agree that I think that public television and public broadcasting can provide some really good services. Historically, conservatives have gone after places like NPR and others, not only because of the tax dollars, but also just the left-leaning bent. And anybody can say that that's not there, isn't pay attention to NPR. But I think he's tapping into something. I think if this is providing a valuable service, especially to seniors, I think it warrants reevaluation, especially for such a small part. But I think it is indicative of a lot of people, obviously now bipartisan, who are saying we want to find waste in government.
All right. A major shakeup could be coming to the Kansas Supreme Court. Senate Republicans are proposing a constitutional amendment that would end the state's decades-old merit-based system for appointing justices, replacing it with direct elections. The proposal would put the question before voters in 2026. Supporters say it would shift power to the people, but opponents warn it would inject politics and big money into the judiciary. The current system was established after a 1950s scandal, but recent court rulings on abortion and school funding have fueled Republican frustration. So a lot of, for people who may not understand what this is, when you go to vote on our state judges or judges like this, the question is asked, should we retain this judge? And that's what Senate Republicans are apparently trying to change. Dion, do you agree with this?
I probably shouldn't say the words that I think would be appropriate to this situation, but absolutely not.
Okay.
This would be the biggest mistake that Kansas could make. We have credible courts because of the merit system. Now, everybody's saying now, well, we don't want all these DEI hires, we want merit. Well, we have a merit system, and it works, and it's worked for decades.
Have you, I would argue though, have you ever seen one of these elections, or could anybody provide an example of one of these elections that has failed? When the question is asked, should we retain this judge, has there ever been more no votes? No,
In other states there have.
In Kansas, we've never not retained a judge. In fact, we had a judge that died during the process, and we still retained, if you will, a deceased judge. So the retention elections, unfortunately, are confusing to the people. I would love to see more education about how this works. But even when the state actually went through a very large effort to educate people about 4 justices that were up for retention election a few years ago, they got kind of close. Around 40% of the people voted to not retain those. It cost a huge amount of money to educate the public. I think a lot of folks just see, well, I mean, there's only one name on the ballot. They tend to vote for the one name. They vote for those that are not opposed by anybody. And on retention elections, there's just one name in each one of those spots. So see people say, yes, I'll vote for that one, not realizing if you vote no, you get a different person appointed. We know in our Kansas Constitution, we talk about all political power is inherent in the people. That's in our Bill of Rights, Section 2 of our Bill of Rights. At the end of the day, though, we have a nomination commission which has 5 attorneys that are bar certified that create who they want to. They appoint 5, there are 3 people, and give those names to the governor, who has to pick one of those 3, or gives that decision over to the chief of the Supreme Court. It is a attorney-centric process. And where do they get their mindset? Where do they get their intellect? Well, they go to law school. And we know KU and Washburn and other universities that have law school, they come out kind of liberal thinking people. So they appoint people who think like them. So we have a very liberal court because of this system, if you will, puts a nomination commission as a majority vote to give those names to the governor, and the system's just broken. And Kansas is one of the very few states, if not the only state, that actually has such a bar-favored system of appointment.
I have to step in on that. It's not a 5-member commission, it's a 9-member commission, and 4 members are appointed by the governor. And there has never been a situation in this state where the 5 attorney members of the board where it's been a 5-4 split between the attorneys and the public and the lay public members.
Yes. That's
never happened in this state. It's a red herring that they just drag across this every time it comes up.
If we're going to make changes, I don't know if what they're proposing here is the best option. I certainly have some questions about it. If we're going to make serious changes to the judicial selection process, I don't know why we don't adopt a federal model, an advise and consent model that would give more in terms of the elected representatives in the Senate to be able to go through a process where there would be a nomination and then questioning, and then they'd have to be approved that way. It seems to work, at least to some degree. At least it did a lot more before the Bork trial, and I don't know why we don't do that. I don't know if what they proposed is the best option, but the process that we currently have with the attorneys doing it and the governor, it's so convoluted and stupid. I think it's a pretty tall order to try to defend that process.
Sorry, Jim, I do need to move on. We're running out of time. Our last story, a historic site in the Kansas City metro, is at the center of a heated debate. The Shawnee tribe is urging state lawmakers to transfer ownership of the Shawnee Indian Mission, a nearly 200-year-old site in Fairway, Kansas, originally established as a school for Native American children. It was built in 1839. The mission was part of federal efforts to assimilate indigenous youth into European American culture. But later, it played roles in Kansas' path to statehood, served as a Civil War barracks and hospital, and also became a key stop along westward migration trails. The Shawnee tribe has $15 million set aside for restoration, but opponents, including historians and other tribes, want a multi-tribal and state-supported approach. For now, the mission's fate remains undecided. This is an interesting one. Ben, what do you have to think here?
I don't know a lot about this, so I want to be really careful what I say here. From what I could read from the reports, it seems like the tribe who would like to receive it has money to make upgrades and all those types of things. This is just very, very tentative. I don't know why, if they have the resources and they want to take it over, that we couldn't do something like with the Historical Society, where there has to be some regulations on, that they couldn't just take it over and not be presenting the full breadth of the, historical history or the story of this place. But if they want to maintain it and keep it up and they can meet those standards, then I would say go ahead and let them do it. Again, that's a very tentative opinion.
Sure.
Probably more to learn there, but that's what I think on the surface.
I'm actually glad the proponents created this bill. It creates a conversation, which we definitely need in the state of Kansas. I watched this hearing, and the fact that you got tribes basically against tribes, it tells me it's very controversial amongst that population of our state, and because of that, I don't think it's likely that you're going to find the legislature going to pick one side or the other. I think this is a conversation that has started that needs to happen. There obviously needs to be a solution to the problem, but I don't think it's likely to advance very far this year.
Dion?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Jim. I think that it's probably not a plan that has a good chance of success. But I do think that we need to preserve that history. And it's good that it's being talked about, because that's been allowed to run down for many years. And if the state's not going to put up the money to keep it usable as a historical resource and an educational resource, then maybe we do need to find some funding from tribes, and maybe they need to work together to determine exactly what they want to present there.
It's interesting, though. Here we are talking about finding funding for something, while earlier story is cutting funding for KPTS or public television. So it's interesting. We talked before the show about the government picking winners and losers. Is that part of this argument?
Well, I think we're talking about private dollars. The Shawnee tribe has private dollars available. They're not asking for the state to do anything other than give them ownership of the building and provide a way for them to take care of this resource.
Well, are they private dollars, or are they tribal government dollars?
In tribal government dollars is what I'm saying. In other words, Kansas budget's not going to deal with this.
Yeah.
It's going to be done by the tribe. So to me, that is similar to a private sector solution. They're not asking for the appropriations to find tax dollars for this. So.
All right, that's all the time we have for this week. Thanks so much to Ben Davis, Dion Leffler, and Jim Howell for joining us, and thanks to Cake and KSN for sharing their materials with us as well. We'll see you next week. I'm Jared Cerullo.